Welcome back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank you all so much for bearing with me as I took a week off to get our new studio together. We are currently in there right now. I apologize if there's any kind of an echo or if it looks weird on camera. We are still getting things together, but I've got enough in here to get this podcast out. So this week, I wanted to kind of continue going back and looking at when JC was first diagnosed, things that we didn't do or things now we wish we may have done, or things that we have talked to other families about, and things that, really have changed the outlook about what happens when you first get that diagnosis. Now, when we were first given the diagnosis, it was actually during JC's second surgery to ensure that all of the tumor had been removed from her brain. We were sitting in the waiting room waiting for the doctor to come and get us so that we could, go and see JC. And the oncologist came in to let us know what the diagnosis was. And, of course, that was choroid plexus carcinoma. When he told us this, we essentially, again, we were in complete and utter shock. And, our daughter has cancer. Now we have an actual diagnosis, because up until now, we just knew that it was a mass in her brain, it was a tumor, whatever, but we didn't know if it was malignant or benign. So now we have this diagnosis of CPC, and we're not really given any options yet. We're just told that it's not a very good outlook. There's not a very good survival rate. We weren't given really good odds when JC was diagnosed. And in that moment, we really didn't do a whole lot of research on what the treatment was or what the protocols were, what the different options were going to be. What we did was we immediately Googled it, found out what choroid plexus carcinoma was, found out the survival rates, and found out what really the initial course of action was, which was diagnosis, and then it was surgery to remove everything, and then, of course, there was chemo and radiation. And those are really just the basic understandings of what was going to be done or what was going to happen in the event that it was cancerous. Now, we didn't know any different from that moment because, like I said, we were in complete and utter shock that this was happening to our family, this was happening to our daughter. We really didn't have an idea as to what we were going to do or what was going to make the most sense moving forward. Looking into other options or reviewing other options for treatments or what was available was really not on our minds at that moment. And looking back on it, I think my wife and I have really talked about it. Looking back on it, yes, I wish we had explored options. I wish we had taken the opportunity and the time to really say, we want to do it this way, or we want this option, or we want, what are all of our choices here, versus we were given, after we had come back and we got the treatment set up for us, we were given, here's what's going to happen, let's go. There was really no options for, the other ideas or what could be done or what was actually talked about with the other doctors that had collaborated on JC's case. There was no real give and take on what needed to be done or what could be done. So we took what we were given and we ran with it, and we just assumed we were getting the best treatment. We assumed we were getting the best option. We were getting the best of everything. At that point, we had no reason to believe otherwise. Now, when you get a year, 2, 3 years down the road, and you start to really think back and look back on those days and on those moments when you received the diagnosis, when the MRIs would come in, the CTs would come in, the blood work would come in, all that time that we had spent in the hospital, really kind of just getting her back up and moving with her PT, and speaking with other doctors, speaking with social workers, and really kind of getting that understanding of what was going on. We look back on it now and say, man, we should have been researching what the treatment options were, or if there were clinical trials available. Everybody wants to mention St. Jude, and listen, unfortunately, we looked into St. Jude, but it was too late for JC. She had progressed too much, and maybe there would have been an option early on for us to be treated somewhere else. We also reached out to Boston Children's. We reached out to New York, as well as the Mayo Clinic. So, we did reach out to other hospitals, but unfortunately, it was way farther down the line in JC's treatment and the progression of her disease that it wasn't going to be an option for us anymore. So we look back on it and say, maybe we should have researched these options sooner. And the thing is, is now we advocate heavily for saying if you get that diagnosis, as soon as you get it, you start researching every option and where the best treatment is going to be, even if that is not where you are at that moment. If that is 2 hours away at another hospital or 2,000 miles away at another hospital, if that's where the best treatment and the best doctors, the best research, the best outcomes are, that's when you start researching getting to those places. And for us, we just really always assumed, and based on what we knew and where we lived and everything, that we were in the very, very best place possible. And the reality is that besides one doctor that we really didn't like, and that was our oncologist, unfortunately, we loved everybody else. Our surgeon was fantastic. Our nurses were great. All the doctors that had helped with her MRI, CTs, and the diagnosis, everybody was fantastic. But our oncologist, we really just didn't like his attitude towards it. Number one, because he had never seen this type of tumor before, never treated this type of cancer before. So it really felt to us like it was a notch in his belt to be able to push through with this rather than say, hey, there's a doctor at another location that is maybe better suited for this than I am. I'm going to recommend this. And what we didn't know is that where she ended up having her radiation therapy in Green Bay, the oncologist that we ended up having there had actually seen this type of tumor and treated it before at CHOP, which is the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. So we weren't started out on the right path, and we weren't really given all the tools that we needed to make the best decision. We will always feel like that. We will always feel like there was something that could have been different. There's something that could have been told to us in a different way, or at least options would have been better for us if maybe we had fought a little bit harder to get those answers. But again, the truth is we didn't understand at that moment that that's really what we should do. And I don't think that that's because I don't think we did anything wrong. I think, like I said, we were in 100% shock at that moment that, that this was going on, that this was happening. We were in 100% shock that we were being told that we had to deal with this, or we had to, that we had to fight this, that this was something that our daughter was going to have to go through. We were just overwhelmed. And so we went with everything that we knew or that we were being told because we didn't know any better. And I've mentioned before that when we first learned about this diagnosis, when we were first told this diagnosis, we didn't have really anybody in our community that completely understood what we were going through or that had been through the exact same thing that we could really bounce ideas off of. Now, I had one childhood friend that I went to school with who his son, had dealt with something similar, and he's doing well now. But that was the closest thing I had to anybody knowing or understanding about a brain tumor or cancer or anything like that. And so we did the best we could with the knowledge we had, and we did the best we could with the community that we had, which was really at that point just a community of support. There was no mentor groups, there was no peer groups, there was nobody coming around handing out phone numbers and saying these are the people you need to contact because they understand. I mean, yeah, you had other organizations that were mentioned to you, but it was never like other families, other people that are literally going through it at that moment or have gone through it, like what we're trying to do with our organization and what I'm trying to do with peer mentoring. That it's something that was never really available to us. So we did what we thought was 100% right. And looking back on it now, no, I think that we missed some steps. I think that the doctors, I don't want to say necessarily misled us, but they definitely did not give us all the information that we needed to make the right decisions. There was, it was, it was unfortunate because we wanted to make the best choices for JC, and we thought we were making the best choices for JC. But in reality, I think although she did respond really well to radiation and really initially with the chemotherapy was really bad, but once we got that leveled out, she did okay with it. The high dose chemo was really hard on her, and the stem cells, that was a really hard time for her. But again, we went with what we thought was right. And, even though we researched, by the time we got different answers or different ideas for what should be done, it was too late. because there are steps that go along with this treatment that will prevent you from taking other steps that may have worked better had you started them better or earlier. And as I've also mentioned before, going through this and now meeting, a handful of families that have felt this or faced the same type of cancer, we've gone through this and realized that JC had nowhere near the same type of protocol as anybody. As a matter of fact, every single family we've met have had an absolute different 180-degree protocol that has nothing to do with ours. They may have some of the same drugs every now and again, but really the protocols were 100% different. And unfortunately, too, these were a lot of options that were never offered to us. Things that we heard of, things that I read about as the treatments were going on, but never something that was really offered to us or that I thought was the way to go at that moment. And it's unfortunate because I think a lot of parents and I think a lot of families are in the same boat, and it becomes one of those things where when you get a diagnosis or you get news like that, the first thing on your mind is not necessarily find an answer. The first thing on your mind is try to figure out how you're going to move forward, how you're going to fight this, how this is going to change your life and your child's life, and how this is going to make a difference in everything that you do. And you're going to do everything you can to fix it and make it better, but there's a really good possibility that this is going to end up taking your child's life, or this is going to end up really breaking your family apart. And there's a lot of families that go through this diagnosis, and unfortunately the parents don't stay together because it's a very stressful time and it's a very stressful situation that nobody can really tell you how to react to. So the biggest thing that we would push now on families is that if you get a diagnosis of something like this, where it's, for us, obviously it's pediatric cancer. If you get a diagnosis like this, the first thing that you need to do when you're able to kind of collect yourself and things like that is you need to research. And that means you need to do your research like you're looking for you're searching for that specific type of diagnosis. You're searching for not only the outcomes, but you're searching for the outlooks. You're looking for survival rates. You're looking at survival rates that are based on if it's a tumor, like with JC, if it's full tumor resection or if it's only a partial tumor resection, because those will have different rates of survival. They'll also have different treatments. And you're also then looking for what the protocols, if there's any actual protocols for what they were diagnosed with, you want to know what those are, and you want to know what those options are going to be, or what those options are if, let's just say that it's leukemia. Okay, let's just say it's a leukemia, and you look it up and you say, okay, because there's all different types of leukemia. And for anybody out there that ever hears someone say it's a good cancer, please just smack them in the face, because that is the most ridiculous thing that you can ever say to somebody. But unfortunately, it does get said. But if you looked up the type of leukemia with everything that goes along with that diagnosis, and you would see maybe you would see different types of protocols, or you would see clinical trials that you could look up and say, okay, this is working for this person, it's not working for this person, but it's an option. You can see which hospitals, or if there's any doctors that have specialties in that type of cancer. And like I said, they may not be where you are. And your oncologist or your doctors are not going to be happy to give you up to go to another location, because they're going to want to treat you unless they truly realize that them treating you may be more of a detriment than a positive for you and your child. So what I would say is that you get that opportunity. You look for everything that you can find on that specific diagnosis. You look for everything. Like I said, from the actual diagnosis to the protocols and to the clinical trials and all that, and you gather that information. You also gather information for anything that looks like it's a negative, anything that looks like it can be harmful, based on studies, not just a website that tells you that, this drug causes XYZ, so you should never use it, or this drug. No. Look for actual studies that these types of drugs or these types of treatments have caused either good or bad outcomes. And, that little, like we always want to tell people, stay off the internet. Don't be a Google a doctor and stuff like that. But you really, unfortunately, in this situation, have to become that expert. You have to be the one that when you go into the doctor's office and they're telling you, okay, we're going to do X, Y, Z, you got to be 100% okay with saying, listen, I don't agree with X. With Y and Z, I'm good with it. Those look like we can use those, but this X looks like it's caused really, really bad side effects on, this study here, and I really want to look into an alternative for that type of drug. And listen, at that moment and at that point in time, and I've said this before, and I've said it in this podcast, and I've said it on social media, when you're in that doctor's office, you are their only patient, or your child in that matter is their only patient. Whatever they've got going on for the rest of the day, whether it's a meeting, whether it's unfortunately another patient, you are the one that has their time right then and there. And if you have questions and you have concerns about what's going on, you need to make sure that you voice them very, very strongly, very confidently, and loudly if you have to. This is your health, or your child's health, that you're speaking for, and they need to be able to understand what your concerns are. And if you truly don't believe that what they're going to do or what they're offering is going to make the best impact, make a statement about it. Make a stink if you have to. But again, this episode is really about making sure that you do all the research absolutely possible to make sure that the best treatment and the best options are given to you. A personal example is with JC's type of cancer. It is a CNS cancer, which means the central nervous system, everything, the cells and everything, they run through the spinal fluid, which is essentially flushing through the body. And therefore, this type of tumor, a lot of times will show up in multiple places. It'll start in the ventricles of the brain, and because of that fluid running through and rushing through your body, they will often get tumors on the spine, down in that area, down in the chest, and all that. So, and in the neck. And so, what they will do is they will do MRIs constantly, and they will test her. They'll test her spinal fluid through spinal taps constantly to make sure that those cancer cells are not spreading through her body. Now, for JC, fortunately in that matter, she never developed cancer cells in her spinal fluid. She never had anything on her spine, anything like that. She had the main tumor that was in her brain and the unfortunate relapse in September of that year, which was something on the base of her brainstem. But one of the side effects of this disease and the side effects of the treatments is something called leptomeningeal disease. Now, there is no cure for leptomeningeal. It can be treated, but it is not something that you can really fix. And the issue being that leptomeningeal disease, I didn't realize or didn't understand was a thing until after she was in the hospital for an additional 12 days after her stem cell transplant due to a seizure. And if you've ever, I can tell you, to see the light go out of your child's eyes while she's still there, sitting there, but basically look into her eyes and have nobody home. There's nobody there. It is the scariest and creepiest, and I can't. It's very hard to describe. And being there by myself at that moment without my wife there was very hard. And to be able not really know what to do, but knew that we had to do something. It was a very, very scary time. But that in itself, that's when I first learned about the leptomeningeal disease. And then I additionally found out through spinal taps that she had cancer cells in her spinal fluid, which was the first time she had ever had them. And once that happened, leptomeningeal disease, one of the ways that you can treat it is through intrathecal treatments, intrathecal chemo, intrathecal medicine. And what that does is that it essentially puts a reservoir in either your brain, like right up here, or puts it in your spinal cord, like on your spine. In which case, they can inject the medicine directly into that area, directly into your spinal fluid, essentially, directly into that flow of fluid that is traveling and creating the pathway for those cancer cells to spread throughout your body. However, and that was actually a common treatment that I looked up, or maybe not common, but definitely a treatment that I had looked up that matched up with CPC, that later on, so I didn't know about it until all that time later. But when that happened, I looked it up and realized this would be a great option. And why wouldn't you treat brain cancer? Why wouldn't you treat cancers like that by putting in that reservoir, putting in, that spinal tap reservoir where you're able to inject those drugs right where the cancer cells are either forming or spreading. And so why that was never given to us as an option, I don't know. But again, this goes back to you research everything. Before you sit down with that doctor and they come up with a treatment plan, you research the hell out of things until you're comfortable with what's going to be happening to your child. Now, the thing that prevented them from doing intrathecals or intrathecal chemo with her is by the time I realized it, she already had a shunt. Now, a shunt is essentially whatever fluid builds up in your brain, which creates hydrocephalus or swelling. As soon as that builds up, this shunt will essentially flush that fluid, that extra fluid. It's like an overflow hose in your brain that will take that extra fluid and flush it. It just kind of goes into your stomach cavity, and your body just reabsorbs it. But that with the shunt in there, that would completely counteract the intrathecal because you'd be pumping essentially chemicals or whatever into that part, and it would just flush it away. So it wouldn't have time to actually do any type of work or any type of positive things. So that's why at least that's what it was explained to me. And maybe if I did, deeper research on it, I could find out that you could still do intrathecal with even having a shunt. I don't know, but it's definitely something that when I finally brought it up, and this was before her high dose started, that I brought up that intrathecal, and I was told that it wouldn't work. Or no, it was after it. But when I found out that it wouldn't work, it was one of those things where I was angry at that point because I felt like that should have been an option that should have been given to us. It's almost like when you're purchasing something, a major purchase, and they give you all the different options that you can get. You're buying a new car, and they give you all these different options on a sheet that says, okay, this is what you want, this, and this, but not this. This is what your options are, or these are your financing options. And you get the option to decide what's going to make the most sense for you at that moment financially. And, the same thing goes for this type of chemo or this type of treatments with your child in a diagnosis like this that will scare the shit out of you and put you in a state of shock that doesn't allow you to really make it. I don't even know what to say. It doesn't give you the option to really think at that moment. You are so wrapped up in what the hell am I going to do, and I can't believe this is us, and all of that, and trying to figure out how to move forward and make it and save your child, that doing all this type of research is very difficult. But I believe that when you're in that moment, or when that moment comes for you to have that one-on-one with your doctor, that it needs to be, here's a list of options. You can go with option 1, which has, X side effects. Option B has Y side effects. Option C has, X and Y side effects. But this is what the probability that it's going to work, and give you all that information, because believe it or not, all that information is actually pretty public. You can find out the probability of success with all of these drugs, the probability that these types of chemo cocktails are going to work. You can reach out to other parents or other families that are on this app, or not this app, that are in this community that can really push you in a way that you will understand, or give you ideas about, this is what happened with my son or my daughter. I would stay away from this drug because if you look here, there's many studies that show that it causes this. And, all that information, even with all that information, I mean, honestly, chemo and these therapies are a crapshoot. There's no guarantee that any of them are going to work any better or worse, because every child and every body is different. So your genetics and the way your makeup and your size and how old you are and your gender, it makes a lot of difference in how these drugs work. It also makes a lot of difference in how you decide to move forward with things because of what the side effects may be. And those are all things you have to factor in. But if you don't have the proper information to really work with, and you don't have the information that's going to help you make the right decisions, then you are left with literally making the only decision that you have the option to do, which is option A, and there's nothing else. And then you learn about these things later that maybe would have worked better, but you never had that chance. And so it can be very difficult and very hard to really live with the idea that you weren't able to make a decision maybe that would have made a difference. Of course, there's no way, there's no physical way, no scientific way to tell what would have happened if you would have done something different. It's all speculation up until now. One drug or one treatment could make a U-turn in the right direction or wrong direction, and that one drug could make it better, could make it worse, and there's nothing that you could have done to fix that. There's nothing you could have done to make it better. You're doing the best you can with your knowledge of just searching, the internet, to reaching out to hospitals or doctors, to searching clinicaltrials.gov, which is where you can find a lot of information. Getting into clinical trials, though, that's a whole podcast in itself. That is a lot of work and a lot of headaches, a lot of red tape for you to get into those. And they may work and they may not. And again, a clinical trial is you're taking a risk no matter what you do with treatment. But clinical trials it's a chance. It's either a new drug or it's a new cocktail. It's a new combination of things that they're putting together that, based on what those drugs do by themselves, that together they should work. There's no guarantee. But you have to be aware of all the options that you have. And the only way you're going to be aware of all those options is if you do the research yourself. Because unfortunately, what the doctors, and at least in our experience, are going to do is they're going to do what's best for your child, but they're going to do what's easiest for them to get in contact with, what's easiest for them to get a hold of. If they are collaborating with other doctors, they're going to do what they think is best, even though those doctors may disagree. And the reality of the situation is nobody here in this podcast, unless you are part of the medical field, will ever truly know what goes on in tumor board. I do believe that what we see on TV, and I do believe that is very true to cause, that you will have 10 doctors in there and they'll look at a case and say it's not even worth my time. I'd say go with this and give them a chance, but I'm not gonna put that on my resume that I put this child or patient through that, knowing that they weren't going to survive. So I'm not going to do that. And I think that is a very prominent thing and a real thing. It's unfortunate. I think that the way we've seen it is that they will go for cases that are easier, or they were slam dunks, things that may work better, but not necessarily doing it because it's the best option for that person. And it's a shame. It really is. And I could talk about that forever. But again, that's 100% speculation. But when you've been in this position and you've seen your child go through what they've gone through, and then you find out that there's at least a dozen options that could have been offered to us way in the beginning before we started anything, and that may have made a difference, it is frustrating. It is angering because I don't have my daughter with me here right now. I don't have her, laughing and goofing around and growing up and watching her sister graduate high school and go to college in a few months, and I don't have her watching her other sister get her driver's license and get a job and be such an important impact on this community based on what her sister went through. I don't have her here to see all of those things. I don't have her here to see our book become a reality in a few months, and to have our organization have grown to the point that it is now, so that we can help so many families, and we can make a massive difference in the research world, and that we have other things on our plate right now that I'm hoping that we can get to take off in the next year or so, because it would be incredible. But I don't get to have her here. I don't get to have her here next to me, growing up and being that unbelievable, independent, sassy, redheaded PICU nurse that she always hoped to be the best mom that she could be, and to be the best parent to all these kids and these families. I know that that's what she's doing in heaven, but she should be doing it here. And so that is why I think we have, a lot built up when it comes to what happened in her journey and in her shit show, if that's, whatever you want to call it, whatever we have built up, a lot of it does have to do with the medical field. I think that there were things that were not done right, things that were not relayed to us in the correct way, things that were not admitted to us. I think we were given false hope at times when we should have been, maybe making memories. I hate that when you hear that okay, there's nothing more we can do. You need to go make those memories. But at the same time, I think that if you're fighting for something that is not there, where you're telling a family that there's hope when there's really not, you're taking that time away, and they don't have that option then to make those memories. We only had 12 days with JC on hospice care before she passed away, and that was some of the hardest days we've ever had in this entire thing, because to watch her steadily decline and steadily get sleepier and more tired and more in pain and more antsy and get just to the point where it was just unbearable, to watch that, knowing that maybe we could have made a difference in that, or we could have fixed it, or we could have made it better, or we could have given her more time if we were just given the information that we should have gotten, or we were given a better opportunity to make a decision that may have made a difference. And again, that is all speculation. There's no way to tell if anything we did would have made a difference, if we would have changed it. But unfortunately, even if the outcome would have been exactly the same, it still would have been nice to have the options to be able to say that we did 100% of everything we could, with everything that's available to us. So with that, I'm going to end this episode. But again, when it comes to these types of diagnosis or these types of information dumps that you get from a doctor, that after you've been fighting for months to get answers, do your research. Take the opportunity, take the time. Google's free, and this community is huge, and we're always willing to talk and to guide you in a direction that would be the best for you and for your family. If it meant helping in any way that we could, we would be there. We'll do what we can to make a difference. So if there's questions you have, again, the podcast comments are always there. You can always find my information anywhere on any social media. You can look it up at Battlecorn CP, or you could look up my name and you can find any information out there, as well as my contact information. I am always willing to talk to families and give you any advice that I possibly can that might put you in the right direction. Again, I am not a medical doctor and I can't give you medical advice, but I can sure give you the information on what we've dealt with and what we've felt, and it may put you in a position to ask those questions that you may not have thought of. So I will see you all next week, and hopefully we will get this studio completely finished. Have a good one.